Imagine you're in a conversation and suddenly, without realizing it, someone has planted a seed in your mind, a single idea, a single number, a single comparison, and suddenly your thoughts, your judgments, your decisions begin to bend, not through persuasion, argument, or logic, but through subtle psychological influence. This is the power of anchoring. Anchoring is one of the most fascinating effects in human decision-making. It's the invisible hand guiding choices, quietly shaping how people perceive value, probability, and fairness. And the terrifying truth is that almost everyone falls for it, because our brains are wired to use mental shortcuts. Anchors are these shortcuts. Once established, they define the range of possible outcomes, often without our conscious awareness. Here's a simple example. Imagine you're buying a car. The salesperson tells you the price is $40,000. Your brain now has a reference point, a mental anchor. Even if you were planning to pay $30,000, you now perceive $35,000 as reasonable. The initial number didn't even have to be justified, it just existed. That's anchoring. It's why negotiations are rarely about numbers, they're about first impressions of numbers. But anchoring doesn't only work with money, it works with opinions, judgments, and even relationships. In one experiment, researchers asked participants to estimate the number of countries in Africa. Before answering, they were asked to spin a wheel that landed on a random number. Even though the number on the wheel was arbitrary and irrelevant, participants' estimates gravitated toward it. Their brains treated it as a starting point, an anchor. Your mind will latch on to any reference point you give it, whether consciously or not. And here's where it gets fascinating. Anchoring can also shape emotions and perceptions. Imagine two doctors delivering a diagnosis. One says, "There's a 5% chance of complications." Another says, "There's a 95% chance everything will go smoothly." Both are the same, statistically identical, but the patient's perception shifts dramatically. The anchor, the first number presented, defines the emotional experience, even when the logic is identical. Now let's step into real life. Picture a business meeting. You're pitching a project. Instead of starting with small, conservative numbers, you lead with a bold figure, perhaps ambitious, but plausible. The anchor is set. Every subsequent discussion, every compromise, every counteroffer is filtered through that first number. Suddenly, what seemed daring becomes achievable. Your audience's expectations have been recalibrated, and the outcome favors you without confrontation. Anchoring is more than just numbers. It's about framing reality itself. A master negotiator knows how to set the stage, choosing the reference point that will guide decisions, shape judgments, and create consensus. And this doesn't require deception, it requires understanding, because once people recognize the anchor, they still have agency. But before recognition, the anchor quietly does the work. Let's explore an example from history. In ancient trade, merchants understood anchoring intuitively. They displayed their most expensive items first, creating a reference point. Suddenly, mid-range goods seemed reasonable, even cheap. Customers felt like they were getting a deal, even though the initial anchor, the luxurious, overpriced item, was never intended to be sold. The anchor redefined the perception of value, and the merchant controlled the mental landscape of choice. And here's where the psychological depth gets even more interesting. Anchoring doesn't only influence others, it shapes your own thinking. When we plan, estimate, or predict, our initial assumptions become anchors. If you start a project thinking it will take 10 days, your brain unconsciously treats 10 days as the baseline, and every estimate or action thereafter aligns with it. This is why goal setting is powerful. The first number you anchor in your mind can expand or limit your potential. But beware, the mind's attraction to anchors is a double-edged sword. Arbitrary or negative anchors can limit performance, distort perception, and create self-doubt. Imagine being told you're only average at a skill you've been cultivating. That label becomes an anchor. Even if you try to exceed it, your brain constantly references that initial point, subconsciously constraining your growth. Anchoring can liberate, or it can imprison. Here's a fascinating experiment. Psychologists asked participants to write down the last 2 digits of their social security numbers. Then they were asked to bid on products in an auction. The higher the random number they wrote down, the higher their bids. Completely arbitrary, yet their brains unconsciously anchored on a meaningless number. This is the subtle power of anchoring. It shapes decisions even when it has no logical relevance. Now imagine using this consciously. Imagine stepping into negotiations, conversations, or presentations with full awareness of anchors, yours, and others. You can establish the mental frame that favors your goals. You can guide perception, create consensus, and influence outcomes without arguing, debating, or forcing compliance. You simply present the first number, the first comparison, the first idea, and the mind does the rest. And here's the deeper connection. Anchoring is fundamentally about human perception. Humans crave reference points. We cannot evaluate ideas, numbers, or outcomes in isolation. We anchor. And the better we understand anchoring, the better we understand ourselves. We begin to see how our thoughts, emotions, and judgments are shaped by what came before. We see how subtle cues, one bold statement, one surprising number, one comparison, can tilt reality. Let's bring this home with a scenario you can use tomorrow. Imagine you're asking for a raise instead of leading with a modest, tentative number. Anchor high. State your value boldly, then justify it calmly. You've set the reference point. Even if your boss negotiates down, they're negotiating relative to your anchor, not their original, lower expectation. You've already shifted the mental battlefield. Or imagine presenting a project idea. Lead with an ambitious yet realistic vision. The first number, the first idea, the first framing becomes the anchor. Every subsequent discussion aligns with it. Your colleagues, your audience, even your opponents unconsciously adapt to the reference you set. Anchoring isn't trickery. It's understanding the invisible architecture of the human mind. Once you grasp it, you realize that influence is not confrontation, it is guidance. It is creating the mental landscape in which the other person's choices naturally lead where you want them to go. And the most profound part, you can anchor yourself too. Before entering any situation, set your own internal reference points. Imagine success, envision confidence, define the baseline of your performance. When you internalize a powerful anchor, the world adapts around it. Your perception shifts, your actions align, your outcomes improve. So here's your call to action. Identify one situation this week, a negotiation, a pitch, a presentation, even a personal decision. Decide on the anchor you want to set, visualize it, present it, watch how the mind, your own, and others bends around it. Then reflect. What happened? What shifted? How did perception realign? Because here's the truth. Anchoring is invisible, but its effects are monumental. Master it, and you won't just influence decisions, you'll reshape reality itself. And once you see how subtle, how silent, how unstoppable it is, you'll understand a secret most people never do. The mind obeys the first frame it sees. Set the frame. Anchor wisely, and the world will follow.